Are bad games bad? I asked myself this question while writing my final college essay for my game development degree in 2021. In the spring, it'll be 5 years since my final semester of college, 5 years of professional game development, and 7 years of streaming on Twitch. I revisited this essay while making the previous video essay and realized I was kinda on fire with this one. This might be my favorite paper I wrote in college and the one I've been trying to emulate when making video essay content on game design today. So I'm going to read it to you all with minimal changes and in a video essay format so that it can be preserved and reach a wider audience. But first, this was written in 2021, so if my takes or the public's takes on games are different now, I'll go over it at the end of the video, but leave the original script intact. And secondly, yes, the title of this video is ridiculous. If good games exist, bad ones must too, right? But indulge me for a little bit as I spiral down the rabbit hole of the anticipated versus the unexpected feelings tied up in any game's given design. Let's time travel back to the mindset of college Emily. My early game design memories are simple. It's a cool Midwestern night in the late 2000s. Young me cannot sleep, so I stay up with my dad playing the coolest console in the world, the Nintendo GameCube. What groundbreaking game are we playing that will impact my life forever? Wallace and Gromit in Project Zoo. We had Super Mario Sunshine, Smash Bros. Melee, and many other critically acclaimed classics. But we always played Wallace and Gromit. Whenever I bring it up as one of my favorite games, I always find myself in a weird place to defend it. Is it a good game? I always answer yes, and then go on to describe all the bugs I found in the game. It has wonderfully funny cutscenes, excellent level design, and a nice runtime. Yet my favorite things are the flaws. In fact, most of my favorite games have bugs that, if anything, highlight my experience. In my journey to become a game designer, I have to ask myself whether or not my favorite titles hold up from a critical analysis. I want to address why I'm able to enjoy games in an unconventional manner, and why many other people are able to as well. Let's start with addressing a controversial title, The Last of Us Part 2. Pocket your internet rage, my friends, this is a safe space. For those that are unaware of the views surrounding the game, players tend to either hate this game with their entire soul or praise it as the only perfect title in existence. With a response like that, it can be hard to judge the actual quality of the game. For people that like the game, they praise the innovative level design, gameplay, and the bold direction. People that hate the game, they criticize the narrative. From a design standpoint, it can't be said that the game's design is good, while perhaps the story could have been handled better or just differently. In my opinion, they should have mixed the levels and the story up a bit more. But the thing about design is that a lot is up to individual interpretation. So players that love the gameplay may have been able to overlook the story, but players that went in for the story may have found the rest of the game's elements unenjoyable. What makes one game unplayable for one person could be an overlooked element for another. Before we continue our design talk further, we have to discuss another element that affected The Last of Us 2's response. We have to talk about big audience expectations, mainly from long development times. When a large game is announced and then suffers from delays, leaks, or both, a fanbase starts to raise their expectations for the game even more. One example of this is Final Fantasy XIII, which ended up being released as Final Fantasy XV. It was announced in 2006 to major excitement. However, there was a lot of development turmoil, and it seemed as though the game would never be released. It would be rebranded in 2013 as Final Fantasy XV. Upon release, it got decent reviews and was a solid entry to the franchise. Yet, there was still backlash because the initial darker and city-based plot had been scrapped for a slightly lighter road trip setting. I still refer to Versus 13 as a separate project because the tone feels so different. While I love 15, I always wonder what could have been and hope those ideas will resurface in a future title. But this desperate want can turn into an expectation, one that can ruin the enjoyment of a game. This has also hurt titles like The Last of Us Part 2 and Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk 2077 is an example of a AAA title being deemed too buggy to play upon release. With the above mention of a high expectation filter being put over the whole project, to have a game that was nearly unplayable on older consoles was unforgivable to most. Those that played the game on new consoles and high-end PCs described their time with the game as incredible. Those that didn't have documented the many issues they run into during a playthrough. But this is where I have to point out something interesting. During these videos describing Cyberpunk 2077 to be the worst game ever, the players still usually enjoyed their time laughing at the bugs while producing their own content. This is the exact reason a lot of people have fun with games such as Skyrim and Oblivion. These games are praised as masterpieces, and even the bugs themselves are praised. So why the different attitude towards the games? One reason could be how the bugs fit the tone. In the Elder Scrolls franchise, there is a level of self-awareness that makes the bugs contribute to the universe and fit the tone. Cyberpunk tries to set up a more serious and dark tone as it was advertised, but then has bugs that break that immersion. Yes, the bugs are funny and therefore enjoyable, but they are more out of place in Cyberpunk. Players also tend to pick out every single bug upon release, but revisit buggy titles later for the fun of it. So perhaps Cyberpunk 2077 will evolve into the next big thing. But why do people, myself included, revisit games that are considered broken? Robert Caillois writes about the different categories of play in his book Man, Play, and Games. One of these categories is illinks, the fun that comes from the loss of control. I believe that is what makes games that are technically unpolished so much fun to play. When you encounter a flaw in a game, suddenly it's out of the player's control. It's even out of the designer's control at that point. What happens from there is a wild mystery, which is the appeal for many players. In Kingdom Hearts 3, the player can get extremely overpowered if they put in the work, leading to chaotic combos that feel out of control. Some players criticize this, saying it's too easy. But perhaps it's intentionally easier at that point because the player put in all the work ahead of time. That's how a lot of RPGs work. The player will be rewarded with overpowering power if they put in the effort. When that reward is something that makes the game more crazy, players that are a fan of chaos will be pleased. In Wallace & Gromit in Project Zoo, World 2-2 is my favorite level in all of gaming, because there is an elevator that is buggy beyond belief. Whenever I start spamming the button to call the elevator, I don't know if I'll clip through to my death, if Wallace will glitch through the wall, or if I'll simply get stuck on a higher floor. That may be frustrating to most players, but it's very exciting to me. Caillois also discusses a spectrum for play, from spontaneous to ordered. Spontaneous play is called widya, and is where illinks is found. This is when the act of play just comes out of nowhere. While technically in a video game the player is constantly in a state of play, specific game atoms only come into play at certain times. In the case of Wallace & Gromit, I was playing the game as a puzzle platformer, and following the rules that had been set for me. But when I go over to the elevator and bugs start happening, that is a spontaneous element. And the fact that I had no control over what happens next makes it chaotically illinks. I've also encountered this spontaneous play in Dungeons & Dragons. In fact, it seems to be the whole appeal of the game. Yes, you have set rules that are strictly followed, but the improv of the session is the real gem. As a game master, I encountered an issue where a player asked to pickpocket a rich character and rolled high. Having not thought through the NPC characters enough, I gave the player a bunch of gold and went on with the session. This led to him buying a bunch of sapphires, which I allowed after he gave a passionate speech about liking the color blue. I look it up later and realize the gems have magical qualities to them, and now that player has a very overpowered magic weapon. If everything went to plan, none of that would have happened in order to keep the game balanced. But instead we let something interesting happen that surprised both designer and player. This unplanned act became a very memorable part of our campaign. These examples aren't the only time that links and widya are encouraged. In older games, there was no point tracking system or data being saved, so there was a large honor system that revolved around most games. Old parlor games relied on this, as well as the Magnavox Odyssey. These games provide a basic set of rules, but rely a lot on player imaginations. When the player follows this rule, they fall into the category of ordered play. It's when these rules are challenged that widya comes into play, and sometimes innovation can take place. During a maze game on the Magnavox Odyssey, players may start to cut corners to be faster. This is technically cheating, but it may inspire them to play a racing game that utilizes that mechanic better. A player in a parlor game might try to lie so that they don't lose, but that mechanic of lying could be put to use in games like Among Us and Town of Salem. New design ideas can come from a moment of spontaneous play in what is supposed to be a controlled magic circle. There are plenty of instances of mechanics that start off as a bug but then get turned into a vital part of the gameplay. Hitman 2 had a bug where throwing a briefcase would result in it homing in on an enemy and killing them. This bug ended up being one of the strongest weapons in the game. Because the community loved it so much, it has been turned into an Easter egg for the series. In Minecraft, the design for the creeper was originally a glitch found in the pig mob. The body was rotated incorrectly, but it looked cool and was turned into a brand new enemy type. In my own levels, I have run into instances where players told me about their favorite feature, only for me to realize they were talking about a bug. Then I'm presented with a choice. Do I get rid of the feature that they liked so much just because it's a bug in my eyes? Or do I rework the design to adapt to the player's preference? There's never a right answer to this, but I often find myself redesigning to the player regardless of whether or not what they liked could be considered an initial flaw. That's not to say all bugs in video games are great. Game-breaking bugs will likely never bring anyone enjoyment, and bugs that ruin game progression can tear apart the work of an entire team. Games such as Sonic Boom and Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 both have game-breaking bugs and bugs that can be considered funny. These games were deemed nearly unplayable and unpopular at release because they could not be conventionally enjoyed. Now, the games have replayability and how weird and incredibly difficult they could be due to these issues. So while there is still links and widya at play, these games aren't what most companies should be shooting for in terms of the quality of their products. This essay isn't meant to make excuses for bugs in video games. Yes, they are understandable, but a portion of development should be given to make sure the end product is, at the very least, playable. My argument here is that maybe not all bugs are evil. A message of hope to other designers out there. Players are picky, even a game with lots of good design elements can be torn apart for one opinion-based flaw. This can seem discouraging, but this type of fixation goes the other way too. Players can latch onto a good thing in a game, even if it is a glitch of some kind. I truly believe the best innovation comes from the unexpected. I also believe the best game experiences come from the unexpected. There is an audience out there for wacky ideas, even if they are unbalanced and imperfect ones. There need to be designers that reflect those ideas. Despite how discouraging the internet and reviews may make it seem, designers should continue to be the risk takers of the industry. There's nothing to be learned from making a flawless game, so we might as well have a little bit of fun with it. After all, aren't games supposed to be fun? And that, folks, is where the paper ends. Back to present day now. I find it interesting how the various games in this essay aged pretty positively. There is a fan base around Last of Us Part 2 now, mainly because the show started to branch away and try to fix, in quotes, some of the things in the game. But this just ended up misunderstanding the intent of it in the first place. Cyberpunk has had updates and patches and DLC that have taken this to an overwhelmingly great response. It's likely a game that doesn't come to people's mind anymore when they think of bad titles. Final Fantasy titles that were a little buggy and weren't as well received, such as Final Fantasy XIII and XV, have become favorites for those that started with them. 14 completely reinvented itself from one of the worst to one of the best MMOs ever made. So with age, I find an additional point can be made that games can not only evolve through updates, but through public opinion as well. And often this is the modern life cycle for games in 2025. Games deemed perfect one day can be torn apart on another, games hated for being different can be praised for their originality. And through it all, I find there is still an audience for buggier games, for sillier games, for games that spark a joyous reaction. So in my heart, I personally don't know if there are any truly worthless titles. If a human made it, it has a soul. Though that soul can be interpreted as good or bad by anybody. Design is subjective, therefore your favorite game is someone's nightmare. Your most hated title gave somebody joy. I believe that every game has a little bit of both, just like the people behind them. I'd like to leave you all on an amendment to my original essay ending. It's okay to enjoy games even when the internet is yelling at you not to. Because games, even bad ones, are allowed to be fun. Thank you all so much for watching. It brought me a lot of joy to revisit an older essay of mine and convert it into a video essay format. If you enjoyed it, leave a like so I can know if you would want another video like this. I mentioned this essay in the previous video essay on Sonic the Hedgehog that you can check out here. I also talk about game design constantly over on Twitch. I hope to see you guys next month for a video on the development of the Legend of Zelda games.